Hey guys, I want to address some issues developers have that prevent them from trying out AMP. The first one I think is the 50 kilobyte CSS limit. First of all, AMP is now working on increasing the CSS limit if the website uses over 90% of the CSS on the current page. Then the second of all, I have never had a problem with the CSS limit, and also having a CSS limit makes you a better developer since you try to structure your code so it doesn't repeat, it is cleaner, and you can reuse a lot of CSS. So it has actually made me a better developer having that CSS limit in. Also, don't forget that depending on your content management system, or if you're using a static site generator with a template agent, you can make it so that you only use the CSS needed for the current pages. For example, in one of my websites that I was building, we had a lot of the CSS was used for the blog. So I rerouted the template agent to only include the CSS for the blog if the user is on the blog page, okay? And then when the user wasn't on the blog page, that CSS wasn't included. This is one example of how to overcome the CSS issue. The next issue developers often have is, and this is something I had a fear of before I started using AMP, was what if I am required to add a very complicated JavaScript feature and I can't with AMP? Then that would mean I have to start all over. Well, actually you don't. If for some reason one of the pages requires very complicated JavaScript stuff, you have two options. First, you can code the page with the complex JavaScript stuff on a separate one that is not an AMP page and then include it in the page with AMP iframe. Or what you can do is simply code the page with the custom JavaScript and include it in the site. And what's going to happen is the site would still work, the page would still work with the design, the AMP components, everything, but since the page won't be AMP validated, it won't be cached in the AMP site, in the AMP cache, And that's perfectly fine. Google actually encourages people to include non-AMP pages when they need complex functionality. For example, one of the examples where developer need complex JavaScript functionality is on the cart page, okay, on the shopping cart page where you can add, remove, edit the contents, edit the quantities. Well, the cart page is not gonna do you any good when it's indexed anyway, because the cart page is generated dynamically based on user input anyhow. So if you have it non-AMP page, you're not going to lose anything. You see what I mean? So the other one is that AMP is only made for publishers like CNN, Fox News, etc. No, AMP is now for all kinds of websites. I have used it for e-commerce. I have used it for online marketplaces like eBay. It has expanded so much. The problem with AMP is that when it was created in 2015, it was exclusively for mobile pages, exclusively for publishers. And the thing is, yes, initially publishers and online magazines and news stations, they gathered together with Google to create this new format, and it was only used by them. So now people think, and this is what I thought, in error, that it's only used by them and it's useless to be used for any other kinds of websites. You can use it for anything you want, and it will give you so much better search engine rankings, better speed, instant feel, which is very important to have an instant feel of loading a page nowadays. Otherwise, users will just leave. Another big issue developers have is, okay, what if Google discontinues AMP? Well, first of all, nothing lasts forever. Even Rome was destroyed eventually. And second of all, Google relies on search most of the time, okay? Google had a lot of other projects that it buried, but search is its core. So Google is never going to destroy search, at least until it's still alive. And AMP helps search results. So AMP directly helps the core. So it is in Google's best interest to keep AMP up and running. Then the other thing is that AMP is actually an open source project. And yes, it is owned by Google, but Google is thinking about handing it over to a nonprofit foundation currently. So basically, it is an open source project with a lot of developers contributing to it. Google even has a contributor developer conference every year. And right now, for example, if you're coding in React or Angular, you're very popular JavaScript frameworks, well, guess what? They're going to die eventually too. And when I was starting out, jQuery was this big, huge thing, and everybody was saying, oh, you shouldn't learn JavaScript, you should just learn jQuery. And now jQuery is dying, and people are actually switching off of it and trying to use other components. But the developers who were coding in jQuery, they were so popular, they made so much money, and every site was using jQuery. So don't worry about suddenly discontinuing AMP, because first of all, the chances of that happening are very low. And it is an open source project, so Google relies heavily on it.